into a possibility.
Yeah.
You almost sit on top of it. There's so much change that can be out there and should be out there, because obviously variety is a good thing to be having.
Yeah, and that's one of the good things that the iPace brought to the market, because I mean, I've often said the EV6 is kind of like an iPace clone in some ways. They it's the same cab forward design, it's the same body shape basically.
The EV6 for me was something I really did consider quite a lot, because like you've just said, it seemed and felt so similar to the iPace in terms of its possibly some of its design cues and where it took some of its ideas from, that it was on my list. The Ford Mach-E as well was something that I looked at, and because of, again, the similar design concept.
So you've kind of got that. You've got the Polestar 2 as well, which all those three, but basically took that sort of coupe.
And it was quite interesting. A lot, whenever you saw the reviews of any of those other vehicles, the comments generally on videos was, so they copied it from Jaguar. And it's quite interesting where people's thoughts were coming from, which goes right back to the other point we made a few minutes ago, was Jaguar had such an advantage in terms of the lead, and they did nothing with it. It just seems an absolute shame that they missed an absolute boatload of future customers because of it. And others have come and go, well, that was a winning formula. We can do this at volume and really push the marketing and get there.
Yeah, we can do it at volume. We can bring the tech up today. We can sort out the batteries. I mean, that's the great thing. So obviously your battery and your drive chain, 300 miles plus. Mine's about 280, 290. But that's real world, and that makes a huge difference when you're journeying. I mean, it makes a difference to actually need to use the charging infrastructure. I certainly don't get any charger anxiety now, because
and the big thing about both our vehicles is the 800 volt architectures. So effectively, I mean, I can pull 300 kilowatts with the Lotus, and that is a really easy thing for these manufacturers really to be doing at this point, is to move on to that architecture and take full advantage of really getting the best out of these vehicles. And it's interesting that both obviously Kia and Lotus have applied that. There obviously is other manufacturers deploying vehicles today, and then they're not going down 800 volts at this stage. And
it's interesting. I mean, obviously the Volvo, Geely, Polestar group have started doing their very rapid charging, whatever they're calling it, the sort of the 100 miles in 5 minutes or whatever they talk about charging, which is a slightly different type of architecture. But it was interesting they didn't bring the 800 volt to the original Polestar, because they had that opportunity to do it. That would have been a real game changer, I think, for it. I mean, it was definitely a game changer for me once I went to the compared to the iPace. I mean, the iPace was so slow at charging as when
it was. I mean, really, really slow, really, compared to obviously like the e-tron that came out just after it, really, and EQC was obviously coming out of that. So they both went with a much faster charge. The only thing I will say about the iPace was, yes, okay, we were getting 110, I think was the theoretical, but the actual charge curve of it was pretty decent. We actually saw this just as very. In fact, the Ken Power thing we did showed that it was a nice we're generally hitting like 90 plus for a long period of time. And obviously I know that isn't the case with obviously some of the others. It drops and it drops and it drops and drops, sort of thing. Now I haven't yet found a charger fast enough for the Lotus to see what it's going to do. I need to find a 250 or 300 somewhere and just see what it's capable of doing, and see whether we're seeing a nice charge curve or whether we are seeing these very sudden steps down, to give an indication.
Need to find an Ionity or something close by. Well, you haven't got one close by, have you? There's
there's certainly nothing around me. That's the problem.
Well, I guess you could go over to the NEC and use one of the fast.
That's true. There is some at the NEC. Yeah, that is true.
Big charges there, but even though they're not quite as good as the Ionity ones for the speed, but I mean,
it is interesting. It is interesting to see what has happened in really quite a short window, really, in tech terms. What's happened in, let's call it 5 years, from when that iPace was kind of crafted and conceived to where we are now. and all these naysayers about, you know, EVs will never catch on and all that sort of stuff. But we both knew that was nonsense. And people say, oh, it's very slow to charge. Well, a lot of that stuff has now been addressed as well, because racking up at these chargers, and if the charger is capable of putting that power, and I know that's not always the case, but if the charger is capable, you can be in and out of these places with hundreds of miles on within 15-20 minutes now.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
perfectly capable, you know.
I mean, I can easily add 100 miles in 15 minutes. There's no, that's and often I'm, because you've got that extra bit, it's amazing how much difference actually having a real world 230 as opposed to an unreal world. So actually having 230 miles of range makes such a difference to actually any sort of journey in the UK, because 230 miles is a long way in the UK.
It is. But what I will say is I've got a trip coming up shortly, strangely, to Surrey, which is actually the identical trip I made when I first got the iPace. And this time, I'm not needing to do as much planning as I did last time, because effectively, I've got it in the battery to effectively go there and back realistically without needing to stop at a public charger. Whereas before, that wasn't going to happen. So you know, I queued up in the line of very many vehicles trying to use Banbury without, you know, turned up there, 8 chargers it was back at the day, and I think I was about 40th in line. And I had no choice, because that was at the time was the major hub on the motorway network. The next one was one single charger at a McDonald's, which I couldn't guarantee was not going to be in use. And
that is a huge difference. And I think it's an interesting problem for the people who are putting the chargers, because there's a need for infrastructure now, because there's a lot of cars still which have got that lower range and need it. But the next generation of vehicles is going to be to 300-400 mile ranges.
And the need to be charging other than your home sort of umbilical cord, so to speak, that's effectively where most people are definitely going to be doing their charging with these vehicles. As you say, most people are not going to do a 300 round trip.
No.
Realistically, it's really those sort of trips become rarer and rarer if you look at the numbers that people drive, you know. So
and the other thing is, of course, is we're going to see faster charging, because 800 volt type architecture, but also there's a whole node of battery technology which is going to improve that initial burst charge. So we're going to see these 10-minute charges for 100 miles or 5 minutes charges for 100 miles, which means if you've got 300 mile charge range to start with, you stop halfway on your journey, you've almost got a full tank again, again to carry on next time.
And that was the daft thing, because I was starting to look at it going, well, hang on a minute, at this point on my iPace I was already starting to get into that, I need to start looking for a charger scenario, because as you said, realistically you were lucky to get 200 miles out of the Jag, apart from a really, really good week in the middle of the summer in absolutely perfect conditions, because it's either too warm or too cold at any other time for that actual sweet spot for it. So you were doing that journey and already going, I might need to stop at Oxford, I might need to stop at Banbury, or you're already starting to sort of get a little bit more sweaty in the seat than you would like to be, really. Guarantee, are the chargers going to work? And we went through all that. I mean, you know, I will always sort of bow to any original Nissan Leaf customer, obviously client, that was going around back in those early days getting 80 miles out of those vehicles or something like that. I mean, those pioneers, they were brave souls.
They were very brave souls.
Because the iPace for me was my first experience with an EV, and you know. There was I can't lie, there was a couple of moments you're like, am I going to get to the charger, you know, type of thing. Is the charger going to work, you know?
I never actually ran it out, but I did get really close a couple of times.
I think the closest I got was about 7 miles, and I was within reach of my home at that point, and I knew that was fine. But the car was starting to get, you know, not just an amber turtle, I'm going to give you a red turtle now, you're really, really trying my patience, type of thing. It was really trying to push me to you know, I'm now going to turn off any form of climate in the vehicle. You can suffer in, you know, regardless. I'm going to get this vehicle to its final destination. But there were some there was, obviously, it's a good vehicle, as I say, but that was, given the battery size, that it should have been a lot better on the efficiency.
Yeah, and that's that's a big thing. I know I see figures in the EV6. I never get anywhere close to the iPace, and I'm still driving it the same way I used to drive the iPace.
Yeah,
exactly. Getting 4 miles per kilowatt hour in the iPace would have been.
I think I saw it once downhill with the wind really behind me once. I think I did 1 mile trip in my local town, and that's it. I called it at that point. That was it. This is the best, and I'm not going to beat this ever again, type of thing.
I've had that on the EV6 in not best weather conditions for as the average for a whole journey. So it doesn't get it all the time, and you can still be heavy-footed and do all that sort of stuff. But it is a remarkable, and how that goes.
I think the Jag, if I'm being honest, I was getting about 2.9, 3 if I was lucky out of it. That's really roughly where it was sitting.
I was always happy if I got 3. If 3 was my sort of, if I was doing 3, I was okay.
But I mean, I was running on 22 inches, so that didn't help. Though I know people go on about the size of tires. I know people that are driving around in the iPace with the 18 or 19 as it became, and the drop off wasn't as much as people claim or in theorizing, type of thing. You might have lost 15 miles, maybe something of that nature, if that. Really, the drop off isn't as big as certainly on the iPace as people suggest, in public forums. And I think that just comes down to aerodynamics and all the other things that's going on there, which we don't think about or probably appreciate really going on, certainly. And I mean, we're seeing that at the moment. Melosa is a good example. Even the alloys, the designs on the alloy, just to address airflow, just to scrape out those extra few miles. You can see what's going on with vehicle development at the moment. It's an amazing thing, really. It's like designers have had this opportunity to just really go to town on stuff that they just want to do, both from a design concept and it's an EV. We'll try lots of new things out, and then being allowed from a lot of manufacturers to get on with it now, which is great.
Yeah, I've always thought with one if you could put one motor on each wheel and start doing torque steering, do you actually need a steering wheel? Could you actually?
Oh, I mean, steering assist on its own is very unnerving. I'm sure my iPace was absolutely determined to put me through a hedgerow on at least the second occasion. So I'm sure it was getting quite annoyed with me at some points.
I wasn't really more thinking about the autonomous stuff. I was more thinking about steering rack and the whole actually being able to turn wheels. If you have a joystick and just move it around, and you got your drive-by-wire tank-like approach, because it's you've got full control of each wheel. You wouldn't get performance.
Just thinking about the word of a joystick. I mean, who in their crazy mind would stick one of those in a vehicle? I have no idea, but it seems like a crazy idea to me. But, no, I think that's a brave person to want to drive around in one of those. I mean, no.
But part of the reason that came to mind then was because you were talking about the aerodynamics, and obviously the ultimate aerodynamics for any vehicle would be to have skirts on over the wheels.
Yes.
Which means then you can't turn the wheels. So if you could do it without turning the wheels,
that's very true.
Straight. I mean, I did actually see there was I think there's a patent for a vehicle, and I can't remember who's got it, which basically when it's driving in a straight line, drops skirts down.
I think I know the vehicle you mean, but I can't remember.
It wasn't an EV. It was a petrol diesel type car, but I can't remember.
I know this is crazy, but for some strange reason, I'm wondering whether it's a Citroen.
It might be, because Citroen had a lot of really clever ideas like that.
There's certainly some of their models which obviously the back wheels were covered and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not a Citroen person, so I can't remember the models and stuff. I'm not even going to suggest one because I will be completely wrong. But for some reason that's sort of jumping out at me. Possibly a Citroen. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I always wonder if you then start having to steer, what happens? Does it react quickly enough to get the wheels out and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That sort of scary. But back wheels being covered in, I think, is something we'll probably see again. I mean, if you look at some of the early hybrids,
possibly. But obviously, you're starting to see some vehicles using rear wheel steering now as well, and you're starting to see that coming in. So, and that's becoming more common than I thought it would possibly be. It's not just on some of the premium brands. It's starting to appear on I guess middle of the road models now, if you want to call it from a numbers point of view. So and obviously there's reasons for that as well, turning circles and whatever. But I'm sure there's other things going on there that obviously this is for their point of view is a way of doing something for that vehicle, which is possibly more efficient and all this, because there's reasons why they're all starting to use that technology now. Turning circle, I don't know, maybe turning circles is the primary reason for it, but most of those vehicles generally can turn around pretty well anyway these days. So I've seen a couple of reviews where you've got rear wheel driving and it's doing some very crazy things at high speed that you really wouldn't want to be doing. It's kind of unnerving, So, but yeah, no, for me, I just think since we both started, and to see the rate of change, the development of that change has been a really good thing. And I'm not just talking about the cars here, the charge networks. I know people knock them. There isn't enough of them. If people looked at the numbers where we were sitting back in 2019-18 and where we are now, it's crazy amount of growth that's taking place by all these networks. And I know there's people that do want to knock it. There isn't enough of it. There is enough out there right now, because it is still very rare that you turn up to these networks and you're in massive queues.
There are times. And bank holidays.
It's like height of the summer season and things like that.
Summer season, and at certain places. I mean, service. But you can always go a little way out your way and find a charger. Because it's like here. I mean, Peterborough is a great example of that. I mean, we've got the extra services, which has got a limited number of Ioneses and has got some good service, and probably going to have some more good service in fairly shortly. But you literally can go 5 miles down the road and find, as I say, now you're going to find seven Instavolts. You've got Osprey there as well. You've got BP chargers in the centre as well. We've got everywhere I look, there's new chargers being installed in Peterborough at the moment. So so you don't have to necessarily go to the surfaces. You can go a little bit upstairs. But also, as we said just now, I mean, the fact that we're now doing getting these 300-mile range cars means most people's trips can begin at home and end at their destination. And if you've got a destination which is in a town where it's pretty easy to get electrical power, then there's no reason why we shouldn't have more hubs appearing in towns. I think that would be the answer.
To me, I start looking at this now thinking the towns that don't have some sort of hub infrastructure are missing out on business, tourist business. And if those businesses in those towns don't start asking those questions, which I personally think they should be starting to put pressure on these local authorities at the very least, or start to ask the charge networks, please come to our town, please try and do something here, try and buy appropriate land. Then everybody's missing a big trick here, a big opportunity, because certainly my part of the world, which is it's a tourist county, it's a historical county. People come here because there's lots of historical places to look at, but with an EV, it's certainly you do have to possibly question it, and then go beyond Shropshire and into mid Wales. Well, there's still a problem 5 years later. I think they've broken ground in Welshpool now. They made another 15 miles up the road, and that's it. Other than that, you've got to make a run to Aberystwyth, and if you get to the end of that single or one charge or wherever at Morrison's, wherever is broken. And
that's still an issue. But I think one of the things which definitely is a help, because at the moment it's really difficult to install hyperchargers or high speed chargers unless you've got all the electricity supplies there, and there are places, because of just the landscape, where it's difficult to do that. Wales being one of them. You get, I mean, there's great hydroelectric and everything in Wales, but you still need to,
they're churning a lot of the stuff out, but it's the grid's going in the wrong direction.
It's really difficult to get grid power you want to. But if you just think about what you just said, go to Shrewsbury. You arrive there. You want to spend. You're gonna drive there. You're not going to drive 300 miles and turn around and drive another 300 miles, are you? You're going to drive 300 miles. You get to get somewhere, and you're going to stay there for a little while. If we actually have destination charges in car parks, and my local, I was talking about Monza earlier, the fact that they can do that put 20, 30 charges in a car park very easily. That sort of infrastructure just solves that problem, because you're going to spend 6-7 hours, and by that time you've got enough charge to get back again.
Exactly, and it obviously sounds like Cambridgeshire is ahead of the game effectively in that regard. I can think of other examples. I think Dorset is another example. I've been down to that area many a times, and the fact that there is poor destination charges is again a big tourist area, and there just isn't those on, as you said, on car parks. It's that's the one thing that after all these years I'm still like, well, that makes no sense to me, because you can put in 7 kilowatt chargers much more simpler than 50, 100 kilowatt chargers, and they just trickle feed, as we all know. And I don't get it. There is no reason, as I say, I'll go back to what I mentioned a few moments ago. Any town that's not doing something to try and encourage people to come in, and that's a wonderful way of doing it. And if you want to encourage vehicles in, but also be nice and green and non-polluting, and that's a bit under the debate on its own, but you know what I mean, sort of driving by and it's a bit more pleasant for people with the fumes and all that sort of stuff. Those are sort of things which are, I just don't get it. And I can think of so many towns sitting local to me where that just hasn't even been thought about, let alone introduced at this moment in time. You know, and there's other areas of the country where EV ownership is questionably lower than in other parts of the country, and yet their infrastructure is already ahead of the game. They've had the foresight to think about it. And that's I guess it's forward-thinking councils versus local businesses and all those those types of opportunities. But I just think the infrastructural changes we're seeing has been quite interesting, and it's all and generally very, very good. But there is still a few areas where you think 5 years, so we could have got this better. From my personal view, we could have got some areas better. And when I say we, I'm talking about the charge networks in that regard. Because as EV owners, we probably pushed that envelope so much, saying, well, why aren't they here, type of thing. But Scotland now without any problems. Scotland used to be a big issue. You can no problems getting up there now without any problems at all.
And I think we just got a few black holes still, which, as you say, Wales being particularly okay. And as I said, there are reasons for that. Just difficulty with getting infrastructure in place, and it would actually probably be better in Wales not to bother with chargers en route, but to just make sure we have lots of destination chargers.
Chargers. Absolutely. It's true. I mean, good example of where we've seen quite a bit of change is the southwest. I think the southwest has remarkably improved. Devon and Cornwall. I travelled down there about a year ago, and it was great. I must admit I was using Motor Fuel Group, MFG's network.
I like MFG. Yeah, that's really good.
Which obviously we haven't spoken about so far, and what they're doing is fantastic. Their charges are brilliant. They're sticking in everyone I've been to is at least 8 or 10 chargers now without any problems whatsoever. But going all the way down to the southwest, that infrastructure down there has remarkably improved. Osprey's another example. They've stuck in another big site down in just trying to think around Exeter area. I can't quite remember the exact pinpoint of the location. That's great to see. They've got chargers there designed for caravans and people towing as well, which is another we'll go back to obviously the HGV bit earlier, but the innovation of that has been good to see. They thought that out a little bit more as well. But yeah, it's just been quite interesting to see the rate of change, the rate of development, both with the cars, both with the charge networks. And the next 5 years is going to be fascinating. I mean, where are we going to be in 5 years?
I know. When you look back where we were when we first got our iPaces to where we are now, I mean, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it? It really is.
Oh, yeah. It's remarkable difference. Difference. But I still want to go and try a grid surf forecourt. I still have not had the opportunity to do so. They're not anywhere where I go. It's one of these weird things.
When Mark and Moore opens up, we'll have to meet up there, because it's not going to be too far away from both of us.
I can't see a need for me to come to Peterborough anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a bit far from you, isn't it? But
we're about same line, obviously, of the draw of the camber of the earth type of thing, but we are literally. It's really weird. Roads east to west are really poor. Yeah, it's really. It's one of those things to get to you. I almost have to go south to come back north again, just because the road infrastructure is great, you know.
Yeah, it's sad that that's the case, but mind you, I've been over to Birmingham quite a few times though. It's not that bad, but and that journey's getting a lot better for charges as well. I mean, and I noticed that BP have just put a new hub in at Kettering, which is on the A14, so that's cool. That's quite good as well. But we're just seeing this all the time. We're just seeing more. But I do wonder about all this investment, because it's almost quite short term. Because I mean, I certainly could see 300 miles being the standard range of a car going forward, and that's with smaller batteries as well, faster charging batteries. So you potentially, I mean, certainly with some of the new battery technology we're talking about, we could be talking 800, 900 mile range with the same size batteries we've currently got, or same weight batteries we've currently got.
And if not smaller batteries as well, doing that sort of range, you know. I mean, you get to the point where you think, well, it's 500 miles too much.
Yeah.
On a smaller battery, because you start getting that, you know, cost versus battery size versus miles.
And I see the sort of longer range. I think 300 is probably a sweet spot, and it actually is going to be really achievable with lighter batteries, which are going to charge faster, because of what they are. And once we get to solid state, if we ever get to solid state, which is obviously the dream, then you can have very light batteries which charge in minutes and do 200 or 300 miles range. And I think that once we get to that level, then efficiency goes through the roof as well. So you're probably talking a lot more than 300 mile range, because
exactly. And then, as you say, you know, what is the approach to them from these charge networks? Because at that point they go, have we got obsolete products almost, for want of a better word? Do we now need to be moving into destination chargers? Is that our new game? Because as you say, you're carrying all that energy from your home, and I know if you've got any sense, you're possibly charging it with some sort of solar or you know, sort of to make it even more efficient. But at that point, you are just literally not having to worry about public charging, for want of a better word. So as you say, and I must admit, it's only since owning the Lotus has my mind gone, ooh, I've got enough miles to pretty much get where I need to go. I don't need to worry about it now.
Yeah, and as you say, planning goes out the window, because you don't actually need to plan. I never plan on my journeys now, because I don't need to.
Well, that's true. I must admit, I'm still in a little bit of a sort of an iPace mindset still with this trip. I'm still putting in those potential en route ones, because I'm still not, you know, sort of sure of it. But I know what the vehicle's capable of, and that's the thing. I can already see how much more efficient this vehicle is. So it's going to be nice to test it on a decent run, and see what it's capable of. So I mean, I'm seeing figures at this time of year. I mean, I only managed to get my vehicle effectively in the November. You know, if I'd had this vehicle drop in June, it would have been quite interesting to see what the efficiency is doing. Or am I then battling up against other things, which is it too warm? Is the car having to try and cool itself down? It'd be interesting to see where its sweet spot is over a given year.
Well, it definitely will be. Well, next time we get to talk, you probably have had that trip, and we can talk about how you went on.
Absolutely.
And we'll do that. But it's been great talking to you, Martin, as ever. It's a bit, we've gone on a bit longer than I probably intended. We'll probably split this show into two, because that'll keep YouTube happy. But we'll catch up next time. But thanks again.
Take care.